This is the Ramblings of Madmen, brought to you by your host Valquist and
Gimble.
Wahoo! So today our topic is what makes a game good, and honestly, there are so many different things about games that make them good that it would be hard to summarize in a simple answer. So we're not here today to try and give you the magical formula to make a game great. Now, we're just here to discuss what aspects of games make them better than others.
To be honest, this will probably be the overlying topic of all of our videos.
That's true. Well, some of them will be more specific, but it'll be fun. Anyway, so starting from the top, Gimble, what do you look for in a game?
Well, one of the first things I actually do look for is the art and the art style. Because game isn't going to be any fun to play if it just looks awful, if you can't tell what you're looking at, or if you're just annoyed by what you're looking at because it looks weird or unnatural.
Well, it's funny here because you and I both don't care about graphics as much. But essentially, so long as it looks good but isn't graphically amazing, it works, right?
Yeah, like take Minecraft for instance. It looks fine. It's a very simplified style of game. It's very, very simple and easy to comprehend what you're looking at. That makes it good. And then you look at some games that have tried to be much more realistic, and they're painful to play. I went back a while ago and tried to play Medal of Honor on the PS2, and wow, I just couldn't tell what I was looking at. Couldn't tell what the gun in my hands was. Couldn't tell what the enemy I was looking at was, and I ended up getting stuck about halfway through the third level trying to find out where I was supposed to go, and I just couldn't see anything.
So let me cut in here. Do you think this will continue to be a problem with our modern graphics being where they are? Sometimes you can't even tell, if it's real or not. It's like I've seen some games that just look like a movie. If the graphics remain at this standpoint, you think that'll be a problem in the future?
I actually do, particularly with some recent horror titles. What people have tried to do is add things like film grain, dust on the lens, and motion blur effects to try to make it look more realistic, but what it does is it removes that visual clarity and makes the game more difficult to play. And instead of something like the enemy making the game difficult for you to win, it's the game mechanics themselves and the visuals that are fighting against you and winning the game. So that becomes a major frustration.
And that's an excellent segue. Game mechanics. What do you look for? I know I have my own preferences, and, I'm going to take it back for a second and answer my own question from earlier. What I look for in a game as far as graphics, I don't care as much. I've played Final Fantasy VII. I've played a bunch of crappy looking games. I've played some amazing looking games. God of War, Spider-Man, all that. I've learned that the graphics, as long as they're able to properly present the game, I don't care. Anyway, so game mechanics.
Yeah.
What do you look for?
Game mechanics. Oh boy. I know that I'm a little different personally in my preferences for game mechanics. But something that really annoys me is a complete lack of options in game mechanics. And I don't mean things like sprinting and whatnot. Like, if you can't sprint, I'm fine with that. But it's when game mechanics inhibit your options for gameplay. Think of the game Fortnite. The way the game itself runs makes it very difficult to change up your strategy or play in a different way and find success. Whereas lots of other popular shooter titles, you can play different styles. Think Destiny.
Why don't you share some war stories from Destiny so that the people better understand what you're talking about with this?
Well, in Destiny, of course, you have 3 weapons. You have your super, and then you have your grenade and melee abilities as kind of a base run-through. And I had a few different loadouts I'd like to run, but occasionally I would run 2 sniper rifles and play very cautiously and distant from my enemies. And one of my personal favorite loadouts, I would equip, I believe, a shotgun. I don't even care what my primary weapon was in that instance. And I would actually disable my super in order to have a more effective melee ability and play with an extremely close range, rapid, high response game style. And while it wasn't very effective, it worked and it was fun, and I died a lot, but I got plenty of kills, so I got to really enjoy my experience.
I gotta cut in here though. So you were saying that Fortnite doesn't work because of that, and I'm not somebody who plays a lot of Fortnite, but you do have a bunch of different weapons options in Fortnite, and switching through those weapons could lead to this change in strategy you're talking about. So could you clarify what you mean when you use Fortnite as an example here?
Well, in Fortnite, everyone drops on the same exact perfect level playing field, and I'm okay with that. It's alright.
Yeah.
But the thing is, some guns just feel completely useless compared to others. I haven't played in a long time, but I remember back when I did play, I liked personally to use the revolver a lot, and not because it was good or effective or it got me kills, but because it was a kind of goofy, awkward gun to use and no one else used it. But if you think about it and you have the option between a rifle and the revolver in the game, the revolver has no accuracy, so even if you wanted to use it just because you like it, you're not going to be playing effectively just because of the random chance of hitting your target due to a lack of accuracy.
So, in other words, the lack of balance here inhibits the gameplay, and that's something you hate.
It's not necessarily the balance.
Well, so in Destiny, they're constantly having to rebalance their weaponry to make them more effective. Boosting damage here, nerfing ammo there, just stuff to make everything as even as possible. And so I'm wondering if that kind of change in a game like Fortnite would make it good for you, or something you could better play.
It would definitely help, but what really comes in is a frustration with the lack of choice, because if they say had a system where you had an ability that you had when you entered the game, maybe a dodge type of ability, and you had a choice of a few different ones, that would improve the game vastly for me, because I have a choice of how I want to play it, as opposed to, having to be a good builder to succeed, or have really, really, really top-notch luck and accuracy because of the RNG mechanics of the bullets in that game.
Well, so I think that, based off what I know of you, I think your biggest problem with Fortnite is the lack of action over the awkwardness of the shooting. You've talked to me about how you get dropped into a map, and if you win, you probably get 4 kills or so max.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a frustration of yours.
There is definitely a lack of action. And I'm not saying that Fortnite's a bad game. I'm just saying it's not a game that catches my fancy. I much like different styles of games from Fortnite.
So you keep talking about choice, and so I'd like to bring up a game I love very much that allows a wide variety of choices, and that's Kingdom Hearts 2.
Oh.
And I'm a sincere sucker for the Kingdom Hearts series, and it's a game series I consider as perfect, not because it actually is perfect, but because you can tell the heart and soul that went into the games to try and make them as good as possible. And so when you're playing Kingdom Hearts 2, you get the choice, you can go full-on Keyblade, which, for essentially anything less than a proud playthrough, not a problem. Proud is the hard difficulty. Critical is the hardest. But the thing is, once you crank it up to, say, critical level 1 run or whatever, you can't just go full on Keyblade. You have to start using magic, and you have to use drives and summons, and you get so many different options with how you can play. And not only that, Kingdom Hearts, throughout all the games, except for maybe some of the weird the handheld titles, they allow you to equip abilities that affect how you fight. So, you equip dodge slash in Kingdom Hearts 2, suddenly you have a new ability at your hands, and if you don't like it, you remove it. And it's this, if you think about it that way, Kingdom Hearts 2 is one of the most accessibly changeable games I have ever played.
Yeah, I really do like the versatility that you can have as a player in Kingdom Hearts. The one thing that I have that's a problem for me personally with Kingdom Hearts is just the complication of the user interface. It's very difficult to figure out how to do things for especially a kid, and that's why I haven't actually gotten a chance to play Kingdom Hearts in a while, is because when I was a kid and I played, I had no idea what I was doing.
Gimble and I actually worked on Kingdom Hearts 2 together as kids, and We got stuck in the timeless world, which is essentially this black and white world where Sora and company are sent, quote unquote, back in time. And, I got frustrated going up against these creatures called hot rods, because they kept just killing me over and over again. I ended up passing the controller over to Gimble, and he just started messing around in the menu. I remember him discovering we could change keyblades, and what was it? Oh! That came? Was it that sound?
Probably something along those lines.
Yes.
I just remember being happy I could change my weapon, because all those fancy keyblades we'd found looked so awesome, but we just couldn't figure out how to equip them for the longest time.
And, now that I'm older and I look back on it, I think the reason why we didn't just swap weapons earlier is because we weren't interested in reading the instructions when we came to the menus. We weren't interested in spending any time in the menu. And it's kind of understandable because the Kingdom Hearts menu is kind of inspired by JRPGs, which are very, very numbers-based. And if you don't understand what you're reading, you're gonna die a lot.
Oh, speaking of which, what are your thoughts on game tutorials?
Game tutorials. I think that they are sometimes good and sometimes bad. And this is one of the areas in which Kingdom Hearts 2 has a lot of complaints with people, and that's the tutorial area. Because for this first 2-3 hours, you're playing as a character named Roxas, and you don't see that much combat. I mean, you do see some, but not much. And I know that a lot of people have a problem with that. But from a storytelling perspective, this tutorial is very, very important. So I can understand tutorials, they're a necessity. But at the same time, games like Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Neo, they all teach us that tutorials aren't always completely necessary.
Yeah, and if you think about comparing the tutorials of Kingdom Hearts and the latest Doom title, the 2016 one, the 2018 one hasn't released yet.
Oh,
if you're watching this, if you're watching this video later than that, but especially the Doom tutorial is extremely simple. It's not forcing you into anything.
Here's a gun, go for it.
It tells you what gun it is, it tells you what button to press, and then it doesn't tell you again. It just lets you keep going. It doesn't get in the way of the gameplay, but it does explain how to play the game. And
that's the approach with a lot of Souls-like games. Souls-like meaning Lords of the Fallen, Bloodborne, and Neo. They just take, here's what the buttons are, good luck. And there are a lot of cases where you have to figure out game mechanics on your own. Like, with Bloodborne, there's a technique you can use called Visceral Strikes. I found out about those by trolling around online. I never found out about them in-game. And
the number of game mechanics I've found just by looking online is quite something.
Oh, it's a miracle. Anyway, so we've talked a bit about gameplay, but I would like to bring up a genre I know you do not like. JRPGs, which are turn-based combat. I gotta ask, what do you think?
I personally hate turn-based combat just because, well, I'm at heart a first-person shooter kind of player. I really like rapid action, high fast response time. I really like my games that come down to accuracy and reflexes as opposed to strategy. I don't like trying to think out which strategy is the best, and I just lack the patience for it. I really like my no-brainer run-and-gun-'em games, Doom particularly.
Okay, I gotta cut in here so that nobody gets this impression. Gimble does not like to do this, but he is not stupid. If he wants to strategize, he totally can.
I don't know about that. I could be pretty stupid.
Well, from what I've seen, you can do just fine when you want to.
Yeah.
Anyway, so for me, I'm not a huge fan of turn-based combat. There are times when it's okay and times when I'm just like, no. But here's the thing about turn-based games. They are far, far, far more accessible to people than a lot of first-person shooters. Because turn-based games, on the most part, are single-player, story-based games, and they don't require intensive controls.
You can think particularly about Pokemon as a turn-based game. All the combat you get into is based solely on turns. And that game, I love it, but it's very, very accessible to young audiences, older audiences. It's not a difficult game to get into and enjoy.
Oh yeah, I mean, I remember being, 6? You lent me your Leaf Green version? And first of all,
good old Game Boy.
I did not save over his save. I kept my Game Boy on for 3 weeks, just charging it constantly, and that probably to help destroy it. But
oh boy.
Anyway, I just blasted through most of the game with my Squirtle. I completely ignored the other Pokemon, and that's the thing: is you can be as ham as you want, you can be as strategical as you want. The difference.
I remember playing and just playing the game, and now that I know a lot more about the game mechanics in the game, I realized that my playthrough was not quote-unquote optimal or well-planned or anything, but I got to have fun.
I look back on some of my on my playthroughs of Pokemon, and I'm like, how in the world did I get that far with just a Squirtle? How? There is no way. But here's the thing, it all came down to grinding. If you were willing to grind it out forever, then you could blast through the entire game with a single Pokemon. If you weren't willing to do that, you had to be far more strategical, and that's a thing that made Pokemon great. It was open to a lot of players. The story wasn't complicated, and it was filled with 150 impossible to collect but stupidly attractive option to get. You know, all these monsters that you want to collect, but can't if you're alone.
Yep.
And so, when I was talking about how accessible they are earlier, I was speaking mainly to people with physical disabilities, because I know that there are times when if your hands or arms don't function right, it might be hard to play a game and you really want to. Having games like this with a slower pace of action, I find it to be very accessible. What are your thoughts to that?
Well, I don't personally really know much. I hadn't actually put much thought into physical disabilities with turn-based combat, but I do know for a fact that if you do have, like, say, limited motion in your arm or wrist or hand, something like, say, Call of Duty is going to be practically impossible to start playing. I remember my first experiences with it. I went over to my friend's house and he asked me if I'd ever played Call of Duty, and I said no. And so we booted it up, and wow, you could have made a 5-hour montage out of just me dying out of about 2 hours worth of gameplay.
That was about my experience with COD. It was, hey, you played COD before? No. Well, here's COD Zombies. Good luck.
And I really do enjoy the Call of Duty titles. I don't think they're the best games out there, but I do enjoy them.
Okay. So, I gotta ask now that Call of Duty's come up. What do you think of Call of Duty 4's Blackout mode, which is a battle royale?
Well, from what I've seen of it, it looks like it handles the Battle Royale game mode very well, but once again, I just don't prefer the Battle Royale game mode just because of a lack of retry ability.
Yeah.
Most games that you're in a PvP mode, when you die, you have a chance to respawn and redeem yourself, quote unquote.
So, here's my question. Team Deathmatch or Free-for-all?
Ooh. See, that comes down to more my preference in loadout. I love experimenting with loadouts, and some of them are just not effective to secure kills on my own. So, say Destiny 2 with its new bow and arrows, I play quite a bit of team-based modes when I want to be effective with those. But I do love free-for-all just for the sheer pace of it. Because whenever you respawn, you know you're surrounded by enemies. You don't have to bother trying to keep your team alive or play strategically with your team. You can just go in, go crazy, and sometimes it actually works.
Yeah, shockingly, I've seen you do well on stuff that you really shouldn't have.
Yeah, I've had some crazy moments with, well, probably not the best players going against me, but it's been fun.
Alright. So, I'm going to bring it back to JRPGs, and the reason for that is because I want to bring up a very key point in a game, at least for me. And the thing I look for in a game that I find most important is the story. And it's not always, there has to be an amazing story for me to play it. Take Dissidia Final Fantasy, I would describe that story, at least on the surface, as being barely there. But I still enjoyed it because I found the combat enjoyable. But still, story is very important, and I am not a fan of turn-based games in that, you know, there's some that I don't enjoy at all. I had a huge problem with Persona 2's turn-based system. I mean, I enjoyed the shadow negotiations, but I found that the combat system for Persona 2 wasn't very fun. But the reason why I played it, and why I play a lot of turn-based games, is because I love the story. What are your thoughts on story, Gimble?
Oh boy. Oh yes, I'm Gimble. I am a dwarf now.
Yeah, it's Gimble.
Well, Gimble. Well, I personally love a good story. And that's something that I feel has been lacking a lot in large titles recently. You can look particularly at my favorite games, Destiny and Destiny 2.
I would like to cut in here. There are games that just released recently, God of War, Spider-Man, that have excellent stories. But I do have to agree, a lot of the big titles are quite lacking in stories. I mean, can you even remember the plot to a single COD game?
Those have plots?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently. They've got story missions, so I assume they're story.
Yeah, but lots of games recently are sold more for their gameplay and their graphics and their online multiplayers than for their stories. But I love a detailed story with a lot of background that can get you thinking. And once again, 2 games lacking in story, or let's go with 3 games. We've got Destiny, or let's just cut that back down to 2 games. We got the Destiny franchise, including Destiny 1 and Destiny 2, and we've got the latest Doom title. And Destiny, the whole franchise, on its surface, well, from the outside looking in, seems to have an incredibly awesome, detailed story. And if you actually play through the story mode, you find that very lacking. There's not a lot of storytelling.
There's not. If you grind a lot, you can get to the Destiny main story in 10 hours. It is...
Well, less than that, man.
Well, I'm saying if you grind a lot. And that's like 6 hours worth of grinding.
Yeah, it's, whew. But if you do actually... If you're a diehard fan and you look into things, there is a ton of behind-the-scenes lore. Destiny 2 has just added these lore cards, similar to Destiny 1's Grimoire cards, except more accessible to read, that allow you to access all of the story that's hidden behind the scenes in Destiny. And you find that there is a ton of story and just a complete lack of storytelling.
I mean,
Doom... Also,
Doom is
when you play
game.
through it,
yeah,
there is pretty much...
Did you listen to any of the cutscenes in the 2016 Doom?
Oh, I listened to all of them. I am very invested in the story of Doom.
I tuned them all out.
Seems kind of dumb, because Doom is very straightforward, very fast-paced.
Kill demons
murder
from hell.
Everything.
Yeah, kill demons from hell, murder everything. That about sums it up.
Yeah, but if you do actually look into it, and there is actually a lot more story available in-game than there is with Destiny, there's a lot of very interesting lore you can get to the main character, Doom Guy or the Doom Slayer, and there's a lot of different things and fun theories you can find yourselves on the internet with the Doom titles.
Okay.
And I do really enjoy the kind of treasure hunt version of storylines where you have enough story to get yourself interested, but then you have to go hunting for the rest.
And this ties exactly into a point I wanted to make later, actually, and that's, should games be overanalyzed? And essentially that's a way of saying, should developers tell their stories in a way where gamers have to go looking for things? So if you look at Souls-like games, they're all very light on story. You have no idea what's going on. Your character was randomly plopped into circumstances far outside their control. It's honestly a thing where, even with Bloodborne, I'm still not sure what part your character plays. With Dark Souls 3, it's if you look at the clues, it's kind of obvious your character is an unkindled, and, you know, Pat from Game Theory has a very good theory on who your main character was, but in no theories have I ever seen anyone explaining the main character of Bloodborne, and that's something to me that is both awe-inspiring and annoying at the same time, because I like having these answers, and I like looking for these answers, but, you know, sometimes the developers don't leave enough clues, or I'm just too dense to notice those clues, and so we don't know. My question for you is, are you a fan? of this style of storytelling?
I really do like, well, maybe not over-analysis, but definitely very intricate analysis of games and their characters and storylines. Destiny has a lot of different theories rolling around about what the light is and where the Traveler came from and all sorts of things, including some that think that you might be the villain in the story, or that you might be being controlled by the villains, which all lead to very interesting thoughts and make you really think about what might be going on behind the scenes as you're playing the game.
And that's an excellent point, but here's my thing with theories, is I enjoy them up until they ruin the game. And when I say ruin the game, I'm talking about those really pathetic theories like, oh, it was all a dream, or it was a simulation, and there are admittedly some theories like that I am not bothered by. But for the most part, when I hear those kind of theories, I think cop out how pathetic.
Yeah, theories that really trivialize all of the things that you've done in the game can become really frustrating, especially when they've been overly justified or nearly proven, or just in a way that they seem to make sense but also are frustrating to think about. Or
well, so let me tell you about a simulation theory that I don't mind, and that's that Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater is entirely a simulation for the main character of Metal Gear Solid 5 Phantom Pain, Venom Snake. And that's training him to be Snake, because he's a fake. And that's the theory. It's something that, again, Matt Pat from Game Theory did. And if you haven't noticed, I'm a fan of Game Theory. And so this is one I don't mind, because he is reenacting something that happened in the past, and it does impact him. It helps him learn how to be Snake. It gives him the skills he needs. And so this is a simulation theory I don't mind. But when we go all Truman show up in his house, we got problems. I just said his house. What am I, hip with the kids these days?
I don't think either of us are hip with our own generation.
Yeah, anyway. So, here was a thought I had while we were preparing for this recording, and that's, or should I say, how big of an effect does nostalgia have on our perception of how good a game is?
Ooh, yeah. I know for a fact that there are some games that I would claim are practically the best game of all time that are very mediocre when it gets down to it.
Oh yeah, you go back and play them and realize they aren't as good as you remember. Like, being a kid, there are things that are so different. Like, I remember Sly Cooper seemed to be the hardest game ever as a kid. And now I'm like, yeah, no, not only is it not hard, it's short.
I remember Sly Cooper being very hard because I didn't know how to save the game, so I had to beat the whole game in one sitting.
Oh yeah. Well, do you even have a memory card at that point? I think you lost yours.
I think the memory card was full, and that was what was causing my problem.
You actually filled up a PS2 memory card? I didn't
My
know that
dad
was possible.
filled up a PS2 memory card, I believe.
I didn't realize that was possible. I mean, so...
Memories, man.
Yes.
PS2s, memory cards, and...
Oh, yeah.
Ooh.
We're going off on a tangent that we shouldn't, so I'm going to bring us back.
There goes the nostalgia.
Oh, yeah. So, how big of an impact do you think it has? Like, for example, if we were to both, I don't know, let's say we went back and played a game like Sly Cooper, and I have recently. But when was the last time you played Sly Cooper, so we can use this as an example?
Oh, I have no idea. It was a long stinking time ago.
So, do you think the game would hold up to your memories if we stuck you in front of it right now?
Well, my brain wants me to say yes, but I'm guessing it probably wouldn't.
I would say that nostalgia, there's another guy who has a very good way of putting this, and I think it's Rob from PlayStation Access, and it's called rose-tinted glasses. Essentially, you're looking back on the past with these rose-tinted glasses on it. It makes everything seem all peachy and nice. And here's the thing, is sometimes a lot of these things hold up. Like with Sly Cooper, I remember it being a very fun game. I remember liking the characters. I remember it being all toonsy and liking all that.
Oh.
But stuff like difficulty doesn't hold up. Not at all, especially when you become more experienced as a gamer.
Here's one. I used to, at my grandma's house, play a game I believe was called Lego Island. Some of you guys might remember that.
Lego Island, huh?
I actually kind of recently was looking it up to try to figure out what the heck the game was, and I found a video where the Game Grumps played it, and oh my gosh, that game looked awful.
Oh yeah.
And all I can think is how fun it was and how cool it was to explore this little island and find all the secrets and whatnot. And, well, I think the secrets were supposed to be things you were supposed to find very easily, but to me,
As a child.
yeah, as a child. But the game was poorly designed, the controls hardly functioned, and, well, it was an old game that barely worked, and... Well, thinking back on it, I go, wow, what a fun game, but actually thinking about it, I go, oh, that was not a good game.
I would like to point out the power of nostalgia in a different way than we're thinking right now. Crash Bandicoot is a game neither of us played as children, right?
Yep.
Okay, neither of us have played it, right? And so they released it recently, and by recently I mean a year ago, released the Insane Trilogy, which is Crash 1, Crash 2, and Crash Warp, remastered from the ground up for PlayStation 4, according to E3 words. And so, there were some things, problems, issues with the remake that I don't think gamers would normally accept if this were a new release. You know, like the biggest controversy I can think of is the hitbox. The hitbox in the Crash games was absolutely massive, unreasonably so, to the point where people would randomly die despite the fact that they were still safe. And so I know that with a lot of games these days, nobody would accept that. But I think here we see the power of nostalgia coming in and saying, you know, we'll forgive this game. When in reality, normally these kinds of complaints would have kept going until they finally patched that and fixed that.
Yeah. And actually, that's one nice thing, or extremely nice thing about modern games is the ability for patches and hotfixes to immediately solve your problems in a game.
I have a good thing and a bad thing with this. And part of me is just like, why couldn't you make the game work right the first time? But the other part of me understands that, you know, you can't. Let's look at Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. There was a game-breaking glitch in the Water Temple that they missed, somehow. And, you know, there was no way to fix that. People were just stuck. If you accidentally made a mistake in the Water Temple and triggered this glitch, well, that goes 5 hours down the drain. Anyway, so, patches. I view them in both a positive and negative light.
Yeah, for me, the positive light comes from the games lasting longer and being overall more enjoyable. Think of Destiny 2 and its near death before the Forsaken patch and expansion / DLC / game rework. And it really brought a lot of players back to Destiny and improved the fun that all the players already there were having. But at the same time, it has completely gotten rid of an entire era of Destiny that many players really enjoyed, and there's no way to step back on that now.
And here's something that you're mentioning that I have personal beef with. I don't like the model of releasing DLC after the game comes out. And my reason for that is I don't like spending more money on a game I've already put so much time, effort, and money into. Let's look at a very recent game, not Destiny 2 because I don't play that unfortunately, but the Spider-Man game. And they were talking about how they'll be releasing DLC in like October, November, and December. And I looked at that and it actually ticked me off because it's a way to make extra money, and that's understandable, but in a way that I disagree with. Not presenting the full game from the beginning is something that annoys me. But at the same time, I can also see the other side of it's great to have extra content. And, you know, this was something that especially annoyed me with Destiny, because I played Destiny 1, but I gave up on Destiny 2. And that's partially because I kept having to chug money into it, and I hated that. And not only that, I was always late ending up the money for the most recent update.
The Destiny franchise is actually a really good example of DLC because some people don't know, but Destiny 1 had actually a 10-year plan. The game was supposed to last for 10 years with continually released content that would make it a fresh new game regularly.
It lasted 3 years. Anyway.
Was it 3? Yeah.
2 or 3, yeah.
Not as long as it should have, which makes me feel like I've missed out on a lot of experience that could have come out of that game, and makes me... some DLC were delayed or changed before they were released, which is kind of frustrating to me because I get the sense that there was a lot of game ready to go that I never got the opportunity to play, and that no one will get the opportunity
and
to
you
play.
view the DLC in a positive light, and I can completely understand that because you love this game and you want to keep experiencing new things for it. But for me, Destiny was always a game where I wanted to play it with my friends, but I could never get the time or money for it. You know, anytime I got the newest update, I was always a few months behind the curve, and everybody always had the best exotics, and I was just trying to figure out what exotics were actually good at that point. And, you know, it was something that was frustrating for me personally, because I never felt I could keep up.
I actually had a very similar frustration. All my friends and I played it, which is part of why I really enjoy the game, is because of the fun times I had with my friends in the game. But there came a time when I didn't have the money for the latest DLC that came out in the game, so I was unable to play with my friends for a period of several months, and that was a very frustrating period for me. And when I did get the game, it had started kind of dropping off in player base, and it was near the announce of Destiny 2. And so I didn't actually really get to play the last season of Destiny 1 with my friends at all.
Yep, that's how it was for me. I got finally the entirety DLC right as they did the split with PS3 and PS4, which essentially killed the game in an unexpected way, because while there was still a player base on PS3, and there certainly was on PS4 as well, the split made it feel like the game was less relevant, that it had died in some way. And maybe that was just me as an outsider, and the people who were into it all 100% all the way didn't notice that, didn't feel that. But for me, it definitely was. And you brought up another point. You are a miracle worker, Gimble. You keep bringing up points I want to mention. Anyway,
Oops.
multiplayer in video games. Your thoughts?
I love myself some multiplayer. It really spices up the game because you get interaction with other players. I remember fun moments playing free-for-all game modes with my friends, and just them being angry at me for what I was doing, me being angry at them for what they were doing, and not in a hatred sense, but in a humorous anger and fighting and no-scope battles and just all sorts of crazy stuff that we'd get into. I remember all those things very, very fondly.
And this brings up another point. So clearly you can have fun with multiplayer, but there's also the negative aspect. You know, there are the people on COD who cuss the kids or whatever, that cuss other players out, or, you know, just the people who can't act mature online.
There is a lot of negative interaction online, and even some negative interaction online that bleeds into real life and results in major problems.
Like
But
divorce, infighting.
there are actually lots of crimes that have been committed over hatred over video games.
There was recently a shooting in Florida because of a Madden tournament. And, you know, it's these kinds of things, they're absolutely horrible. The fact that anybody would hate another person over a video game to that point, to want to kill other people. And it's just something absolutely horrible about video games as a whole. And, you know, they're not the only thing that suffers from this. You know, there are books where if an author kills off somebody's favorite character, they'll threaten the author, or TV shows where if they go off on hiatus too long, they might start getting threats to get back on or whatever.
Well, moral of the story is humans are
jerks.
garbage.
Yep.
Woohoo!
Anyway, so here's the thought then. Is split screen better than online?
Well, split screen, I feel, has been severely neglected in the PS4, Xbox One era of gaming, because I remember...
That's what Halo built itself off.
Yeah, exactly. I remember playing Halo with my older cousins and them introducing me to Halo Reach on the Xbox and playing that split screen and just having so much fun with all of my cousins.
And here's what bugs me is we picked up the most recent Halo 5 Guardians, because Halo is well known for being a split-screen game, and we thought we were going to have fun together, only to discover that it wasn't split-screen at all.
Yep.
It's
a very
horrible
big
thing.
disappointment, especially we had my family had a PS3 and a PS4, and well, we spent hours looking for split screen games that we could play together on our PS4, but very rarely found anything. We mostly had to play our PS3 games if we wanted an experience together as siblings.
Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, I can't think of any multiplayer PS4 games besides Overcooked and the assorted racing games.
There is Geometry Wars.
I'm not a fan of Geometry Wars.
It's a fun game, but definitely there aren't a lot of games that really hold their value in split screen anymore.
Well, I mean, the best split screen franchise game off the top of my head is actually the Lego games. Isn't that funny?
The Lego games are amazing. I love those franchises. Just everything about all the Lego games.
I admit I do miss the era of Lego games where the characters were mute, because I thought that was funnier.
Oh, that was so fun.
But you know, and that's the amazing thing is games don't have to be amazing on all levels.
There's that nostalgia again, huh?
It's not just nostalgia here. Games can be fun without an amazing story. Games can be fun without amazing graphics. Games can be fun without extreme difficulty. And I think the Lego franchise absolutely points that out, because looking at the story, none of them are particularly phenomenal. They're all retelling a story we already know. There are no twists, no turns. The comedy might be a bit better or worse depending on how they handle it. But the Lego franchise is still very fun, and it's because it's an accessible franchise. The penalty for death is just dropping a few studs. You respawn instantly. Nothing is particularly difficult.
You can play with siblings and friends and just in person. And I really miss that era of gaming with party games, playing on the Wii with lots of your friends, or maybe LAN parties, playing the Halo games, StarCraft.
And here's the thing. Boy. One of my favorite multiplayer games you and I played together, Gimble, was Star Wars Battlefront. The originals. Not those DICE remakes. No.
Whew.
You know, Star Wars Battlefront 1, you go and sniper on me, and I'm just like, where is he shooting me from? It was wonderful. It was great, because, you know, first of all,
the game mechanics were simple.
Yeah.
You had options of how you could play. There were different things you could do. I remember just selecting the Wookiee class and just lobbing grenades with the grenade launcher randomly and seeing if I could get any kills that way. I remember times when I'd go and turn on my own team and see if I could get the enemy team to win. And there are just a lot of fun things you could do with such a simple game because of the options you had. And playing it with a friend was some of the most fun you could have.
And here's the thing, is right now we're mixing two of our discussion topics, subtly. We're talking about nostalgia for one, and multiplayer for another. And, and so I would be curious. I mean, Halo suffered serious backlash from Halo 5 Guardians not having split-screen couch co-op multiplayer. And so from that, they promised, you know, we'll always include it. But that's good for Xbox players. But for PlayStation players, we've got, what, Army of Two for the PS3?
I've never heard of that.
Exactly my point. I barely heard of it. It was just like in passing. And it's a two-player shooter where you have to have two people. And, you know, COD, I know I played COD Black Ops 3. I was chucked into the fire because I'd never played it before. And it has multiplayer. But it wasn't multiplayer that I felt was gripping or engaging. It wasn't something that I felt I had to come back and play.
I remember the Uncharted franchise. That's one known for really good storyline, really, really good graphics, interesting characters. I know there are a lot of complaints about gameplay and mechanics, such as the parkour. I know there are some complaints about. But that one, I remember Uncharted 3 had a split-screen multiplayer where there were brief story missions you could play.
Oh, we had tons of fun with that.
Oh, yeah, and there were difficulty settings you could change, and it just allowed you to have fun playing storyline with someone sitting right next to you, and you could chuckle and have fun and strategize together face to face,
and that's the great thing about it. But I gotta point out the downside to couch co-op multiplayer, and this is the staunchest defenders of online we'll talk about, and that's what if they're across the country? What if, they are in another country? In that case, online is your only option.
Yeah, but I've Uncharted, those same multiplayer co-op maps you could play online or split screen, and I just love the versatility of those options. If you have a friend right next to you, you can play together and have fun. If they're across the country from you, you can play together, but you don't need two consoles to play, where games like Destiny or Doom, you need to have two consoles set up if you just want to play together, and most people just don't really have the time or money to have two consoles or to set up two consoles near each other for party games.
And in a lot of cases, they can't even be near the people they want to spend time with. I mean, so we live in the West Coast, but Gimble here, about a few months back, lived on the East Coast. How do I spend time with him? It didn't work. We had to play online. And the fact is, though, there were a lot of online games that we couldn't play together, that we weren't interested in playing together, because either I didn't care about the game, or Gimble had already gotten so far ahead of me in the game that I couldn't catch up, and it wasn't fun for me. And I don't know about your perspective, but what we'd usually end up doing is we'd just play our own games and chat using the PS4 party option.
Yeah, and I feel like lots of multiplayer games have just lost that factor of playing with friends. Just the magic that is having friends in, it's social life in video games, so to say.
It's the driving factor of socialism, and not socialism like the governmental method, but socializing between players.
Yes, there's a big difference between socialism and socializing.
Oh yeah, huge difference. And so it's time to bring up a topic that I know you have been waiting for a long time.
Ooh.
Music in video
heck
games.
Yeah.
And so we are going to talk about Doom, first of all, but I want you to hold off on mentioning Doom. No, control yourself. It will come up. We will talk about it.
But
just
Doom.
Tell me, of course, just tell me, thoughts on music in video games. Is it necessary? Is it something that we need? Is it something that people want?
Music can seriously make or break a video game. Well, just think back briefly on wherever you are, whoever you are, what the last game you played was, and think about that soundtrack. And I actually used to play my games primarily with no volume, and that was because I'd get up early in the morning and play and hope my parents wouldn't wake up so I could play longer before they had me do chores or anything.
And that's your version of Saturday morning cartoons.
Yep, exactly. But as I've grown to, have enough money to buy myself a good headset and really appreciate the music, I have grown to seriously appreciate the soundtracks in video games. And think on some famous franchises. Mario, you can recognize the sound of that soundtrack just anywhere in the world. You hear the first few notes, you know what you're listening to.
Thanks, you've got it stuck in my head now.
Yeah, there you go.
Anyway, so I played the most recent God of War, and I enjoyed it. The story was great, the combat was absolutely phenomenal, but I don't remember any particular moment where the music stuck out to me. And I do remember that there were a few times where it was really cool and it had a driving force, but for the most part, it just, meh, whatever. There was nothing driving me to listen to it. I could have had the music volume off, and it would have mattered. Some
game producers would argue that is a success of a soundtrack. I've heard the argument that a soundtrack is supposed to go unnoticed.
No.
But and while I can see the logic behind that, I also just love when a soundtrack is there, it's real, it's noticeable, and it's driving you to play even more.
And so there are some games where it's not the entire soundtrack, but specific songs that really stand out. And I'm pointing to Skyrim when I say that. Because for as good as Skyrim's soundtrack is, none of it stands out to me as much as the Dragonborn song. And to the point where I was listening to the Dragonborn song long before I actually played Skyrim. It was something that I enjoyed. It was something that I loved. And it was driving me to keep listening because it was an epic song. And I find that that's a way I get introduced to a lot of games that I really enjoy now.
Yeah, the soundtracks are amazing. And be it huge franchises hiring massive orchestras and composers to make their soundtracks, or solo artists creating their own game, like Undertale, and creating their own soundtrack. A soundtrack can be...
I got Megalovania stuck in my head now.
Have fun with that.
You keep getting songs stuck in my head, you devil.
But these games with their incredibly well-made soundtracks are made by their soundtracks. And I can't resist anymore. I'm going to talk about Doom.
I'm letting you now.
Doom's soundtrack is incredible. If you haven't heard anything about it, I'd highly recommend you go watch interviews with the artist who created those soundtracks, or who was in charge of creating those soundtracks. But it's fascinating to hear about the development process of the soundtrack.
And so here's my thing with the Doom soundtrack. I don't view the Doom soundtrack from a musical level as all that impressive. I view it from a technical standpoint. What they were able to do to make it flow and combine so flawlessly and seamlessly. I view that as a technical feat of the highest order. And something that is truly amazing.
So, I recently got Doom and played through the entire game with a brand new headset with a bass boosted mode on it.
Oh man,
Oh man, I feel spoiled after that.
I picked up a copy of Doom at the same time. We were playing it next to each other.
Technically, I picked up both copies of Doom.
I got him a game in return. Anyway.
So, the Doom soundtrack, what's truly spectacular about it is, first off, the ability of the soundtrack to match the theme of the game. It matches your environment, it matches the combat, but the really, really spectacular thing about it is the fact that the music was written in a way that it is different for every playthrough. And let me explain that. When you're playing the game and you go into combat, the music will amp up to, combat mode of the song. It's not a separate song. It has several transition chords, and then it goes into the combat song. And if you're fighting and you perform a glory kill, the game slows down very briefly, and the soundtrack, instead of continuing on or just slowing down with you, actually plays slightly differently for that brief period of time. There's a transition note where the song literally stops on a dime and changes to match exactly what you're doing in the game, making it fit your gameplay and feel extremely smooth and fluid and really just push you to play the game.
And again, I remember playing and you sitting next to me and just be like, you hear that gunshot? That's a G note.
Yeah, actually, the minigun in the game, they've got this tri-barreled minigun, and that's another fascinating thing they did. When it's firing, they have the note. I don't remember exactly which note it is now. I don't think it was a G. It might have been. But the note actually matches the song. So when the gun's firing, the overlap of gunshot noises meshes into a specific note, a droning note that actually matches the music, instead of clashing against it, drowning it out, or muting out the music completely. That matches the game. And it's just incredibly impressive technically. I personally do enjoy this standpoint, the music from a musical standpoint, and well, that might just be because I'm a serious metalhead, but
I do enjoy it from a musical standpoint, but I don't view it as awe-inspiring from a musical standpoint. Like, nothing will get stuck in my head, and I don't think anything will really inspire nostalgia for me 20 years down the road.
Yeah. But the Doom soundtrack has actually been impressive since the original Dooms. You've got that original Doom soundtrack that's pumping you to drive, and actually I really love the moments when it plays when you find a secret. It just plays that really brief section from that, and that inspires nostalgia from a game I haven't even played. Whew.
And so, I'd like to bring up another game, and clearly the power of nostalgia is showing today. But, Kingdom Hearts soundtrack.
Oh, yep.
Yep.
That's a good soundtrack.
And here's the thing, is it has 2 tracks for every quote-unquote world you're in. So say I'm wandering around Sleeping Beauty's castle. You've got your regular music playing, it's nice, it's lovely, it's slightly catchy, but not as much as some of the others. And then you get into combat, and suddenly, boom, you're playing a different song, and it lets you know, hey, this is a fight going on. And it's usually just similar enough to the base song to let you know, hey, you're in this world. But it is usually kicked up to 11, with the pacing, the instruments, the intensity. It's kicked up to let you know, hey, you're in a fight. And the thing is, each and every single one of those songs was written in an excellent way. Props to Yoko Shimomura, the person who wrote Kingdom Hearts soundtracks. It's stuff that is honestly impressive because each of the songs are unique and they match the environment, but they also help you get immersed in the game. And side note, the song that inspires the most nostalgia for me is Twilight Town's regular theme.
There's also Destiny has the whole Destiny franchise has a very impressive soundtrack, but in a different sense. They have a massive orchestra playing beautiful pieces of music. And while it's not something where the music is matching the gameplay throughout the entirety of your game, it's a really amazing soundtrack, and I actually have purchased the soundtrack off of iTunes and have it on my phone and listen to it regularly. But it's different kind of spectacular. It really just doesn't play along the game with you. It plays in certain areas and plays along with the storyline, but it doesn't match your combat. It doesn't match everything you're doing.
Quote unquote storyline.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so I think it's time we move on to another topic. As much as our passion for music bleeds through, actually no, there's one more game I have to mention before I move this along. Persona 5. And
I've heard much about this game from you.
Yes, and I know you haven't played it, and I know you lack the interest in playing it, because it's a turn-based game, and admittedly, the main reason why I picked up the Persona is the story and the social links, which is, like, socializing. And
yeah, I'll leave Persona as your area of expertise, Valquist.
Yep. Just call me Val, it's shorter. Anyway. The thing...
But full names are so fun.
Yeah. Sure. Anyway, the thing with Persona, though, is, first of all, it started the 77th Waifu Wars with its romance options, but the thing that was really amazing that I wasn't expecting was the music. And the music isn't just an orchestra, it's like they took a pop artist or whatever and had her sing a bunch of songs. Rivers in the Desert, anytime you start a heist in Persona, I just have to stop and rock out to Life Will Change, because it is just amazing. And that's the thing, is more than DLC, I find that music keeps me in a game. It's something that drives me to come back just to listen to that music, just to rock out and enjoy it. And, you'll see that with music that has a lasting impact, it can drive your fan base further than ever before. I mean, have you ever played Final Fantasy VII?
Nope.
Yet you know the song One Winged Angel.
Yep. That's probably mostly thanks to you, but...
Yeah, well, I knew One Winged Angel from Kingdom Hearts more than Final Fantasy VII. I did end up playing Final Fantasy VII, but that was only a few years ago. Versus, 9 years old, playing Kingdom Hearts to death. Anyway, so now I do have to move the topic along, or else we'll never escape music.
Aww.
What effect do you think the fan base has on a game? And clearly this has to be a franchise, because very rarely does a new game have a fan base already.
Whew. Well, let's see. I've got a few games I can talk about, but I think I'll start with Destiny, because Destiny has had some serious issues, and well, let's just start with balance issues. And I'm going to talk about Destiny 1 for this, because it's had the largest issues with balance.
Yes, it
Destiny
has.
1 has always had its so-called broken guns. for playing in the storyline, quote unquote, or strikes or whatever, you had your Gjallarhorn. That thing was unbelievably powerful.
I mean, I never got to be in the Gjallarhorn Prime era, but I remember hearing stories about how if you wanted to be in a raid and didn't have it, you wouldn't be allowed in.
Yeah, pretty much. And that thing just dropped enemies like nothing else. You could just melt your bosses. But the big thing is, well, no one was complaining about that, but in PvP is the issue. You've got your guns like the hand cannon Thorn, which you could shoot someone with twice and walk away and still kill them, as opposed to every other hand cannon that needed to get 3 headshots to kill. Thorn just tap, tap, walk away. Or the Last Word, which fired full auto and had some glitch where instead of only dealing extra damage while hip firing, would fire extra damage when aiming down sights. You could kill people with 2 shots.
Didn't they end up nerfing the Last Word?
Oh, they nerfed everything so hard. Everything at one point got some nerf or another.
I remember hearing more about the Gjallarhorn being nerfed and the Last Word being nerfed more than anything else.
Yeah, and shotguns all over. Shotguns had so many different nerfs and patches to the point where they actually
Became
almost completely removed special ammo from the game in its entirety.
Considering how much I love shotguns, that almost made me cry.
And then of course guns like the Icebreaker and Sidearms became extremely prevalent in the PvP game modes because they had more special ammo than in any other gun.
I remember getting a hold of the Icebreaker long after it had been nerfed, and I loved it anyway, so...
So the community... Well, I've been talking a bit about balance, but that all comes about from the community. If no one complained about guns being broken, it's not very likely that they would be patched. Well, Destiny 2 now. Destiny 1, of course, had its balance issues, but Destiny 2 has always felt, to me, personally, a lot more balanced. But it still had its issues, and the community has a split in it. There are people who want Destiny 2 to be much more competitive, and there are people who want Destiny 2 to be a much more fun, accessible game for people to play. You've got...
And that's the great thing about Destiny and Destiny 2, is they offer good options for both PvP and PvE. And that was something that, even though I didn't like Destiny as much as I could have, that's something I still have to compliment them on. Is there were so many options to do PvE with friends, to do it alone, to do PvP with friends or alone. Destiny handled that kind of stuff very well.
Yeah. So, back to Destiny 2's little community divide.
Yep.
It got the developers stuck in a place where they weren't quite sure what to do, because there were people who liked the game how it was, because it was very competitive and teamwork based in PvP, and there are people who wanted the games seriously changed and rebalanced because they felt it was lacking that fun, chaos, crazy factor. And personally, I was one of the people on the side of fun, crazy, and chaos. But I do...
Of course you would.
Yeah. So, that put the Destiny 2 developers in a very awkward spot where they couldn't please their entire audience no matter what they did. And that's part of what ended up driving away a large portion of the player base of Destiny 2 before the latest Forsaken patch. And while I know there are a lot of players who are unhappy, overall I think they've done a good job. So the player base of a game and the community surrounding it
can definitely have a good impact.
They can have a very good or a very bad impact on a game. There's amazing things like fan art and lore and the community working together, but there's also people who just ceaselessly complain about a game no matter where it is, and end up kind of trapping the developers where they're not sure what they should do to fix the game to keep their entire player base as happy as possible.
And here's the thing, is I'm going to point out a different way that a fan base has a very positive effect on a game, and that is with remakes and remasters. I mean, you look at I mentioned the Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy. If the fan base had never had the passion for that, if they never loved it, it never would have been made. When you've got people who are passionate about it, who love it, when the fan base is pushing for it, that's when you'll start to see change. You'll start to see good games. Let me give an example. There was a game I played recently called Shadow of the Colossus, and
ooh, that's a good game.
I enjoyed it, but I didn't think it was blow me away amazing. I thought it was good, and I ended up quick brag here. I got the platinum for it. Yay! I enjoyed it, but it's really the community and the fan base that have kept it alive long after it technically should have died out. Because if you look just at the PlayStation era, it should have been dead. You look at it shouldn't have existed. Yet the fan base is what kept it going. The fan base is what allowed people to come back and remaster it. And oftentimes remaster are the definitive versions of the game. They're the versions of the game that should have existed to begin with, but just weren't possible with the technology back then. Looking at Shadow of the Colossus, that's what I see.
Or the latest Doom remake.
Well, there were
and the one following it.
There are a lot of people who viewed the original Doom as far, far superior. You remember talking to that one guy that we ran to at DI, which is our version of Goodwill.
There's just a lot of incredible things, because you take the original Doom and there were people who absolutely loved it. There's a ton of controversy surrounding it due to its insane violence.
Which, looking back on it, I laugh and it's like, that's not insane
That's
violence.
not violence.
That's a couple of pixels.
That's not violence. Now that's violence.
Yeah.
Of course, that led to the latest, there's Doom 3 as well, which lots of people were unhappy with because it was styled more as a horror game than a unstoppable force of nature smashing his way through hell literally type of game.
And I feel like Doom should strike that balance between horror and absolute mind-crushing violence.
And I feel like they've done a very good job, and I am super excited for the Doom 2018 remake. But the community is what's kept this game going in the way that it can be remade all these times.
It's 20, 30 years old? And it got a remaster?
Yeah, and I'm very, very impressed with the game for, still being around.
Yeah, and that's an amazing thing fan bases can do, is not only can they have the negative impact, they can have the positive impact. But I have to point out aspect of negative that you don't see all too often, but you'll occasionally hear about it. And that's when the pressure from the fan base is so strong that the game fails.
Yep.
And they want the game to succeed so bad that if the developers fail at any little thing, it'll just crush the game. And this is where fan bases become a bittersweet thing. It's the impact they can have can be absolutely amazing. But whether that amazing is a good thing or a bad thing is up in the air.
Yeah. Because in this modern era, the fan base is really what influences a game to exist, especially with beta testing and crowdfunding for smaller titles and everything.
And, you look at some games that have hit upon a formula that they seem to like, COD or Battlefront or Battlefield. They hit on a formula that they seem to work, everybody seems to like, and they keep rehashing it. But the problem is eventually people are going to burn out on that formula. So how do you tread the line between innovation and the same?
Here, let's talk about a franchise that's done a pretty bad job of that. Battlefront itself. That poor game. Battlefront 1 and Battlefront 2. And I'm not talking the modern ones. I'm talking the good old PS2 ones.
I would have accepted a remake of the original and been like, wow.
I would have accepted the original relaunched on PS4. No graphic overhaul or anything.
If there was a graphic overhaul, that would have been outright amazing, but I didn't need it. Maybe a little touch-up,
I can understand the failure of the EA's first attempt at a Battlefront remake. I can understand the direction they tried to go, and it overall failing. That's something that can happen. But Battlefront 2, it's like they followed the exact same formula despite the protests of their community. And the game just kind of collapsed out from underneath them.
So this connects to another topic I wanted to bring up, and that's microtransactions. And see, the thing that really killed Battlefront is EA's stubborn a microtransaction attitude. And here's the thing, if they had a good way to handle microtransactions, the complaints would have arisen. You look at Fortnite, and for as much as I'm not a fan of it, their business model is superb.
I am not a fan of playing the game, but I love their business model and the design of just how they run the game.
And
they regularly update it for free, they add as much content as they possibly can, and they don't charge you an arm and a leg for that, or even just to play the game.
And that's what makes it so good.
Whereas Battlefront, you had to pay upfront the full price of the game, you had to pay for DLC, and you had to pay if you wanted to be,
good.
You know, so far competitively viable or whatever. You had to pay microtransactions to get your power-ups and your weapons and
EA is a legendary company for being just bad with microtransactions. You know, they had quote-unquote learned their lesson with microtransactions, and we were expecting better business models for them, or for them to be completely gone in games like NBA 2K16. And I can't say I care too much about sports titles, but, you know, there are people who are very invested, and EA had this model with, I think it was NBA 2K17 or 18. I'm not sure. Again, I'm not too invested in these kinds of games. But where if you wanted to change something about your character, say you wanted to add a tattoo or get a haircut or whatever, you had to play the equivalent of somewhere near 200 games just to get the in-game currency needed, versus popping down $5-10 or whatever. And for people like me who don't ever want to spend a cent on a game past the original purchase, which is part of what made Destiny so hard for me. But it's when this is essentially a requirement to get the game where you want to enjoy it. This is a poor business model, and EA just doesn't seem to get it. And, you know, there's a controversy recently about their most recent basketball game where, you know, it looks like they had tweaked the grind for the beta and for the reviewers so that they wouldn't complain about it as much, and then amped it up the second the game released with the day one patch. Whew. And what do you think about that?
Bad idea. And that's the point when the community can have a very positive effect on the game and a very negative effect on the people making it.
And well, so here's the thing: it's not a negative impact on the people making it, because if they continue to make good games, make viable games that people want to play, they will make money. And they will see profit. People will keep jobs. But when you keep having poor business models like this that make people decide, I'm not playing their games. You know, I had a little brother who loved Battlefront 2 to death, but he ended up just burning out of it because they focus so much on microtransactions instead of stuff like viable gameplay or religiously ensuring their game succeeded. And you went from something that could have been good to something that just was absolutely pathetic. I mean, even Battlefront 2's story mode, quote-unquote story mode, didn't have enough to drive players. And we know that the Star Wars franchise can have very driving stories. You look at Force Unleashed, I loved it to death.
And even like the movies, if you look at Rogue One, that was absolutely incredible, in my opinion.
I get there was a lot of controversy around Rogue One.
Well, pretty much all the new Star Wars title, lots of arguments and controversy over whether or not it's good, but I think Rogue One was the best of the new Star Wars titles.
And I don't have any problem with that. I mean, I didn't watch Solo. You know, I heard a lot of controversy around it. I just lacked the interest because I burned out.
Oh, look at that. And just like that, we're critiquing movies instead of video games.
No, I'm going to tie this back to games. I'm going to tie this back to games. Give me a second. And so you see this with video games as well, where they keep releasing games with the same formula or the same franchise, and people burn out on these games. They stop caring, they aren't motivated to play it anymore.
Look at Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. That game...
people bought it just for the remake that it came with.
Yep, they didn't want more of the same thing. They wanted the people making the game to try something new and different.
Do you remember the hype when they and I say do you remember like it's an old thing, but it was just like a year ago, when they announced World War II?
No, actually, I don't. I was doing all my testing in high school.
Well, so you didn't even need to be online to see the hype. You just needed to see trailers on YouTube. Well, that's technically online, but whatever. You see that kind of stuff, and you realize that COD got what it was after with an old formula that they did well. And I keep speaking of formulas like they're a bad thing, but they are in some ways a good thing. They just need to be handled right. And after years of getting a formula they put up with, for lack of a better term. I was going to say hated, but that's a bit strong. They finally got something they're after, and it was something that was so exciting and so mind-blowingly amazing that it just got a lot of people who burned out on COD right back in.
Yep. And from what I've seen, it looks like a very fun game.
Oh, we've tried it.
I have played it, haven't I? Wow, look at that.
Though we just played zombies.
No, I did play a bit of the multiplayer. I haven't played the storyline, but it's a very fun game and very interesting, and you get a whole different feel from all these modern, quote-unquote, shooters and futuristic shooters and whatnot. You just get a completely different feel, and it's very fresh and fun to play
it's driving.
World War II instead of, World War 40 trillion 18 or whatever.
Shooter in space!
Yep.
Anyway, speaking of that, I want to bring up a franchise that I really enjoyed, and I know you didn't get to try much of, but what you did, you enjoyed, and that's Lost Planet 2.
Oh.
Lost Planet is a franchise that I really enjoyed, and I'd like to see more from, but it has to be done well. And there's pressure from fanbase right there. But here's the thing, is Lost Planet handled each game very differently. I mean exceedingly differently. And that's what made, despite being the same franchise and same story, it's so attractive to me as a player.
I just realized that anyone listening to this can't actually hear me nodding, so I'm just going to say I'm nodding right now.
You're nodding right now. And this has been Ramblings of Madmen. And we will now enunciate what we are doing.
I'm currently raising my hand.
I'm waving my hand in the air back and forth. Anyway.
There's the Madmen.
Yep.
In case you were wondering.
Well, absolutely mad, good sir. Anyway.
Oh, gosh.
I know my accent's horrible. Lay off. Anyway. So, you get Lost Planet 2, where it's the same game, same franchise, but it feels so different from game to game. And it's not like Final Fantasy series, where it's completely disconnected from game to game. It's not shocking if the gameplay is different. No, it's the same connecting story. It's just organized weirdly.
Talking about a strangely organized storylines, cough cough, Kingdom Hearts.
Oh,
what is the story?
Baby. You big baby. So here's the thing with Kingdom Hearts, is you have to be willing to play each game to get the story.
Which I actually appreciate, because that's really pandering to their diehard fans.
It's not even pandering, it's good storytelling, because if you can jump in at any point in a game and understand what's going on, that means the story isn't very good. But the fact that Kingdom Hearts requires you to understand what's going on in the other games to understand a current game, that to me just says, hey, this is like a book series. You can't jump in at the 5th book and get what happened in the 3rd. Okay, you might get a few tidbits here and there. It's like playing Kingdom Hearts 2 before Kingdom Hearts 1. You understand some of what happened in the earlier games, but there's a lot of stuff that you just won't get. And I think that's where the storytelling right there is particularly amazing. And, well, I wanted to bring up one more thing before I think of anything else. Controls.
Ooh.
Oh boy, is this a topic that's particularly strong to you?
Definitely. I hate awkward controls.
And here's the thing, is not all controls are even awkward. It's just sometimes they're so different from other games that it's a headache to get used to. I have to mention Kingdom Hearts again. Despite me loving this game series to death, they have weird controls for a lot of people.
Oh my gosh,
I mean,
yeah.
So, in most games, X is the button you use to jump. In Dark Souls, it's the useless button. No, it has uses, it's just you can't jump with it. But in Kingdom Hearts, X is the button you use to attack.
And what you, well, X is kind of your action button. You got this whole selection menu that you have to scroll through to find the action you're looking for in order to press the button to do it, and then you press, like, circle to jump, and then there's weird camera mechanics and targeting methods, and
here's
long
the thing.
story short, that's why I didn't play much of the game, is because I could not wrap my head around the controls.
And that's the thing, is getting used to the controls is the hard part, but once you're used to Kingdom Hearts' controls, they flow easily. In fact, a lot of the button placement makes total sense when you're playing the game. It's just looking at it. X to attack? What? That doesn't make sense. That's just looking at it. But when you actually play it, complete sense.
That's one of my other personal complaints with Fortnite, is the controls are wonky, and really, actually, the menu is really wonky, so I couldn't even figure out how to change my controls.
I mean,
because you get to the building controls, and, well, long story short, I just never build in Fortnite, which is why I'm probably bad at it, so, and that's probably why I don't like it, so there we go. I'm mad 'cause bad.
Oh, Gimble, how dare you hate Fortnite? The commenters will tear you up alive. Don't worry, I hate it too. I'll help you.
Oh boy, and there goes the YouTube channel, dead before it launches.
Yeah, well, so here's the thing with Fortnite, is it's popular, shockingly so in my mind, but it shouldn't be as popular as it is.
Well, I think it's just popular because of the, it's free to play, and
that's
well designed, and constantly updating. It doesn't get boring unless you're someone like me who just gets annoyed by weird, dumb things like gameplay mechanics.
And the fact that you can't rack up 80 kills in one game.
Yeah, that too.
But here's the thing, is I am not a huge fan of shooters, and that's part of the reason why I don't like Fortnite. If I play a shooter, there has to be something about it that attracts me. Like, when I played and enjoyed Uncharted, I loved the adventuring, the whole aspect of you're Indiana Jones, but with a gun, and you're different, and you're a villain, and technically, instead of an archaeologist hero. There was that aspect of Nathan Drake toes the line between being a criminal and doing the right thing. And I love that. There was the whole aspect of the gunplay was good, yes, but the gunplay doesn't attract me as much as the whole aesthetic, the feel. I just loved it. And
good controls.
And good controls. Uncharted had very good controls.
A little bit different from other games, but once you've gotten the hang of them, they are very good controls.
My problem with Uncharted's controls are how you swap weapons. It took me forever to figure out, and every time I pick up an Uncharted game, it takes me forever to remember. But here's the thing, is if the controls were the same for every single game, I don't think it would be as fun, because when you have different controls, you have to get used to different mechanics. That means that games change and innovate, even in the same genre. And that's what I think makes the first-person shooter genre so viable, is even if you get 3 shooters in a line, they will all have different mechanics, so long as they aren't all COD.
Yeah. Another thing about controls is I like controls that allow for some versatility. Think of if you had to press, let's see. Think of if you had to press R3 to aim and L3 to shoot. Think about how awkward that would be.
That would be horrible.
Yeah. Or, let's see. I'm trying to think of a good example. But lots of games, they make it in... The controls are set up in a way that you can't perform multiple actions simultaneously.
How about Infamous?
Or in a row easily.
So, Infamous is a game, I really enjoy it, and I don't know if you've played enough to say you particularly like or hate it. But here's the thing with Infamous. If you want to jump, you can't be aiming. And if you want to be aiming, you can't be doing climbing or whatever. It's a game that doesn't string together actions very well.
Yeah, and if you look at gamers, some of them hold their controllers with the claw method and various other methods of holding a controller to allow them to press more buttons simultaneously, which is really impressive.
I look at the claw method, I wonder how they're not breaking their fingers.
I've tried it a couple times. It's a little awkward to get used to.
I've tried it too, and I wondered how I didn't break my own finger. Anyway.
But it's... I really appreciate games that work to get their controls in a way that you can do what you need to as fast as you can, as smooth as you can, and string together or even simultaneously perform your actions without, breaking your fingers or just smashing your face into your controller to press that extra button.
Yeah, it's...
Or take Doom, where they've removed mechanics such as reloading and sprinting,
which
to allow for easier
Yeah.
methods of gameplay and easier actions.
And I didn't really notice it until you pointed out that there was no reloading in Doom. But once I noticed it, I really appreciate it because you just have to constantly
unless you
be
count
firing.
the super shotgun,
Which, you know, the fact that you have
barely counts.
for that one, I think the reloading is a part of the mechanic of shooting it. It's what makes it so satisfying to use.
Yeah. But they've taken out those extra weird controls, which allows you to focus more on
Slaughter.
your movement and your aim, and
slaughter.
slaughtering the literally everything.
Everything must die.
Is there anything in Doom you don't kill?
That one weird guy, Samuel.
Well, he doesn't really count. I'm talking like average. And is there anything alive you come across that you don't kill? Vega. You don't kill Vega.
It's a computer program.
You don't kill the drones that give you power-ups, even though you do punch them in the face.
I count that.
No, there isn't. Very simple game. You don't have to worry, like Infamous, you have to be very careful about what you're attacking because...
If you're doing a good playthrough.
Innocent civilians freaking everywhere. I can't use half my abilities because I really like making things go boom, and I keep making civilians go boom, and that's...
But at the same time, you're the person who likes the good decision. You feel... I don't know if I'm reading this wrong, but... You know, I got him a copy of Infamous in return for the copy of Doom, and this is Infamous' second son, to clarify, which streamlined the controls very much. Thank you!
Yes, I am very much enjoying the gameplay.
But my compadre here, Gimble, is definitely much a chaotic evil style player. He likes to slaughter everything and go ham and have fun. But he had to make the good decision for some reason. I have to understand why.
Freaking I have morals, gosh dang it! Ah!
And I will say the story of Infamous is always more satisfying with the good playthroughs.
Yeah.
Even if the powers and the booms are always more satisfying with evil.
But that's a nice thing about Doom is you don't have to worry about innocence or not shooting things. You just go through, mow through things, and you can focus on your movement, you can focus on all your abilities, and there weren't any times when I was struggling to press my buttons to perform an action.
And here's the thing, with Doom, they did a very good job of making you feel like you were in the moment every moment. Even when you were pausing the game or...
soundtrack!
Or swapping guns, you know, it all felt very seamless. I mean, I had to get used to the weapon wheel because it was very different from the weapon wheels I've used before. But still, it was a very good mechanic and one that I enjoyed. And Doom, I think Doom will live on for a while in one way or another, whether that be through the original or through the remakes. And I know that we keep talking about essentially the same 3 games, but I feel the need to bring them up because they are
We're huge fanboys, that's why.
Fanboys!
So, also, Doom does have one problem. This is a little bit back to formulas. It's multiplayer.
It's garbage. Absolute
yeah, pretty much.
Horse crap.
It kind of fell apart because they seem to be trying to copy very popular and successful game. COD. Yeah, they're trying to copy games such as Call of Duty, or at least imitate what they've done, instead of making it a classic Doom arena shooter.
Okay, so if I were to make a multiplayer with Doom, it would be a PvE, where the enemies receive insane buffs the more people you have.
That would be actually a very fun game mode. But I do like my PvP, and especially games such as Unreal and, you know, Doom. They have very good, simple mechanics. It's an arena-style, just run and gun. You start with the same weapons, and you know where the weapons drop, so you can go find them and just go on an absolute slaughter.
One of the great things about Doom is it's 50% luck and 50% you just keep going. We've been attempting a UAC nightmare run.
Ultra nightmare difficulty. Oh boy.
And we've been attempting that these past few days, and we...
It's like occasionally you just fall over dead, and you just...
Like, how did I die just there?
Don't even know what happened, and Pay attention to where explosive barrels are.
And that's what I mean when I say it's 50% luck. And that's a great thing about Doom is you can make up for that luck instead with skill. You can pay attention. And I'm honestly out of things, topics I wanted to cover. Are there any things you specifically wanted to cover, Gimble?
Let's see. How about you go first? My brain seems to have frozen up.
Okay, well, so I brought up pretty much everything I wrote down. What's your thought on, we mentioned graphics earlier, but I have to ask again. No, actually, let's just summarize. We're end phase, we're about to end the show. Let's summarize everything we've talked about. So we talked about graphics. Graphics don't necessarily have to be good to make a game successful, but they still have to make it be there enough to make the game playable.
There has to be visual clarity, if not...
Yes, and if the
insane, sparkling, smooth polish.
And there are some games where they've got the insane sparkling and it works. The graphics have to be good enough or stylized enough to make you understand what you're doing and what's going on. We talked about gameplay. You know, what drives good gameplay? Is it the shooter genre? Is it the whatever? No, it's gameplay has to be balanced. It has to be well done to drive a game and make it good. Music. Unfortunately, with a lot of games these days, the approach to music is just that it's there, and it doesn't matter beyond that it's there. The most recent Spider-Man game, it has some good music, but it's the same 3 or 4 tracks over and over again. Nothing stands out, nothing drives me to be like, I have to listen to this. And so I think we both agree on this, music has to be good to help make a game good. Music can often drive a fan base behind a game that wouldn't exist otherwise, shockingly enough. Story. We covered story and it was a slight mess. Story is a very important thing in a game, but for a lot of people, it definitely doesn't surpass gameplay. And for me personally, story often does surpass gameplay. I've played many games where I'm not a fan of X combat system or Y mechanic. Yeah, I played it for the story. So story has to be there, and it has to connect and make things make sense. Destiny, we mocked it for its story, but it drove people through its excellent gameplay. So story, I feel, should definitely be there, but to make a good game. But to make a game that people want to play, doesn't need to be there. To make a game that lasts a long time and drives people to play the same franchise, there does have to be good story. The controls. They cannot be awkward. They have to make sense. You have to be able to work with them. I think that one of the best control systems I've worked with recently was God of War's. It was very instinctive. Once you knew what they were, you could chain them together like a madman and work with it, and it was great. And God of War had its own version of glory kills, by the way, Gimble.
Oh, heck yeah.
Go
yeah. Glory kills!
Anyway, so controls, they have to make sense, they have to work, and they can't be wonky. Presentation. We didn't talk about this directly, but we certainly mentioned it. And presentation is the way in which a game shows itself. So, like for example, COD. I mentioned that the way it presented itself with World War II brought back a bunch of players. And that's the marketing, but everything. If you can have a good presentation for a game, if the menus make sense, if the characters, their motivations make sense, if everything looks and flows seamlessly together, it provides a good presentation that drives people to enjoy that. Fan base. We have talked about the fan base and how it is good and bad. And these words can't be to the developers, but to you, dear listeners. You need to understand that a lot of effort goes into these games. A lot of passion, a lot of love. And sometimes developers will make mistakes. It's our job as the fan base to help them understand when they make mistakes without destroying them.
Be friendly, guys.
Be friendly.
Don't murder the poor guys who worked so hard to try to make something for you to enjoy.
Yep. But at the same time, you still need to help drive them to be better, to have the passion for it. And lastly, nostalgia. Nostalgia is a very strong thing, but you can't use nostalgia alone to make a game good. It can be used to drive a fan base. It can be used to help keep a game alive. It can help bring gamers back. But if we relied only on nostalgia for games, then we'd be playing the same 8 games over and over again. You want to play Pong 84?
Ooh-wee!
Anyway, so I've been Valquist,
And I am Gimble.
and this has been Ramblings of Madmen.
If you're interested in hearing us discuss something, please leave it in the comments.
Like, subscribe, comment, especially
Blah,
comment.
blah, blah, whatever all the other popular YouTubers say.
And if you want to start discussion in the comments, keep it friendly. We love having logical discussions and sharing opinions and thoughts. But trampling on other people for their opinions and thoughts is no good.
Don't lynch each other.
Don't lynch. Yeah.
And have a good one.
Good night.